everybody as well and say Happy Father's Day. It's always a nice thing when you think about what your dads are doing, and it's kind of like you want to thank them, but most of the time you don't know how to say it. It's kind of hard to say things to your dad. My dad's passed away for a couple of years, but it was always kind of hard to say how you felt about things. I think it goes the same way in the other way. So you give them a whole watch or a golf club or something like that. You say, here you go, you know what I mean, and things like that. Like I said, there's a little picture up there with a lot of that, but a lot of times it is the thought that counts, and it kind of says what you can't say with words. I believe that they have a gift today as well for men and fathers in the church as you're walking out, that they'll be doing that. It's kind of that same idea. We just want to thank you for what you do and just honor you this time. It's not a Father's Day sermon today. A similar thing happened with Mother's Day. We were preaching through family, and it seemed like we've talked about Mother's Day on that, mothers in part of the family. But today we're going to talk about fathers and Father's Day, because it's going to be kind of part of this bigger picture of prayer that we've been talking on. And so as you kind of think about today and the picture, we kind of have two topics. And I hate doing this because sometimes, like, when people go, oh, he's got two topics, his sermon's going to be twice as long. It's just so hard to do that. So instead of hopefully twice as long of a sermon, hopefully it's like the twist kind of, you know what I mean? And again, for every father who likes this, it's like, hey, let's go for ice cream. Yeah, you know. And so ice cream makes everything feel better. So it does. And that's what I said. I liked it because in I mentioned this earlier, and there's like praying in God's will. It's like, asking you're praying stuff here, like it says about your dad. You ask your dad, say, hey Dad, let's have some ice cream. So you go to your Father in heaven and ask him in his will, how much more will he give this to you? We've got these two things. We want to talk about prayer burdens today. And what that means, but at the same time, we want to talk about praying for children. I feel like this prayer time is a preparation for our VBS. We said last week that Jesus, before he had his ministry, he had 40 days to prepare, and he fasted during that time. And so this week we had a day of fasting. We wanted to prepare for that. We wanted to say, listen, we've got all this stuff going on. Let's push some of that stuff to the side. Let's push some of that stuff out of the way and ask God to give us his. And as I said, fasting is when you take your desires and you push them away so that you can find God's desires. And God's desires are always better than our desires and things like that. And so we find that one of the things that God said, and Jesus said, he said, let the little children come unto me and forbid them not. When Jesus was here on earth, he was teaching, and people were trying to bring children to him, and his disciples were like, whoa, 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 he's way too important for kids, you know what I mean? It's just, who do you think you are? Only VIPs can get through here. And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. These are the ones who are important to God. These are the ones that God, and he takes them up in his arms, and he blesses them. And it makes us realize that we need to be doing things, because we may not intentionally say, oh, we love kids, but we do things that kind of keep them at arm's length and keep them out and stuff. And so we want instead, we want to embrace them, we want to hold them up, we want to pick them up and bless them and pray for them. And so we want to do that, and it's kind of part of this bigger picture of it. It's an illustration of the prayer burden. When you pray for something that's really on your heart and you find peace from God, it's where you say, no one else can do this. I've got to take it to God, because God is the only one. And if you're a parent, you have felt that. You know what I'm saying? If you're a parent, you can say, I can do everything, but there's no guarantees with kids. And you might feel like, oh, I've done this, well, what is going on? And the only thing we can do is we can take them to God, and we can give it to God. And we can say, God, you love these kids as much as we love them. God, you love them even more than we love them. And everything that we would do for our kids, God, you do that to us. In fact, we would die for that kid, but Jesus, we know that you died on the cross to save them. And so that's the type of burden we're talking about. And so as we move into today, that's going to be this main point that we have, that we think about, that prayer is taking our pain to God and getting his peace in return. So we've talked about prayer with different pictures during this time. The first week we talked about prayer as circling something. It's important, you circle it, you focus on it, and you say, this is something important. Prayer is circling these things. And we said we wanted to circle the calendar We wanted to circle our schedule. We wanted to circle these resources of these books and these journals. We want to circle our team, our teammates, our church, but most of all, we want to circle ourselves. We said that prayer is when your heart talks to God's heart. That prayer has to be heartfelt. And I like that, and when I talk with kids, that's often the definition that I use. That prayer is your heart talking to God's heart. It's something that's more than words. It's more than that, but God gives you that. And there's times before you pray that God prompts you in your heart to pray. There's times while you're praying that God prompts your heart. And there's times afterwards that God prompts your heart and he says these things. It's a heartfelt thing that happens. We said also that prayer is an identifying mark of a Christian, because if you believe in God, you'll talk to him. But if you don't believe in God, are you going to talk to him? No. That's why we said prayer is something that's a matter of faith. It's a matter of belief. Because if you believe that it's going to happen, then you do it. If not, you don't. And when a lot of people say, well, I'm not sure I pray or not, it's more than, well, this is a reflection on God, that God can't do it for you. It's a reflection on us and our faith that we don't have that type of belief. And last week we said that prayer and fasting, they go together. Because what is fasting? Fasting is a thing that you circle. It's about specifics. It's about your heart and getting God's desires. And it's an identifying mark. It's a spiritual faith type thing. This week we're adding to that, and we're taking this idea that prayer is taking your pain to God. You've got the pain in your life, you've got these things in your life, and I will be honest up here to say, like, there's probably fewer pain in your life that cuts as deep or hurts as bad than it's pain with kids. It hurts when you see a kid hurting, when you hear a kid crying, it's awful. Stop that. And when it's your own kid, it tears your heart up. And you sit down and you say, what can I do? And God's telling you, you can take your pain to him. Prayer in its essence is going to God. We circle these things. We believe in faith. It's a heartfelt thing. But it's giving that pain to God so that God can give you his peace in return. All of these sermons that we've talked about have had their own passage. And so our passage today is in 1 Samuel chapter 1. It's actually a number of verses. So I've got a couple of verses up here. I'm going to kind of tell you the story and do a little bit of summary and stuff. But it's a story that you may have heard before and you may not have. But it's about Samuel and his mother and about how he was born. And so it makes sense if you think, all right, this story is about Samuel and it's about when he's born. What book of the Bible do we think that this story could be in? 1 Samuel, that's right. And what chapter would it be in? Chapter 1. All right, so there you go. So if you're trying to think back, oh, he said something, I want to read that story for myself. He just kind of summarized it. I'd like to read it out of the Bible. 1 Samuel chapter 1. And in this story, you're going to get told that there was a man named Elkanah, and he had 2 wives. I'm going to tell you, that's not a good way to start your story. It's really not. It's like, I was at Kid News Camp one time, and this kid got in trouble, and a girl had told him to do something, he did it, and it just wasn't the right thing to do. And he got in so much trouble that I said, I got to talk to your mom when you get. And she shows up. And so she shows up, and she sees him standing beside me. She kind of comes over, and she, he's not just running out to me to get in my car. I got to get out of my car and go talk to him. So she's walking across the parking lot, and he's kind of looking down, looking around. She knows, something is going on. So she gets up to the 2 of us, and she's like, all right, what happened? And then her son goes, Mom, there was this girl. And she looks at me, and I said, hey, listen, any story that starts like that, it's not going to have a good ending. There was this girl, and this story starts, there were 2 wives, and they did not get along. One had children, one did not. And the one that had kids let the other one know, oh, I have kids. And it's interesting because as you read the story, you feel that this is sort of side comments that are going on. All right? And so if you look here in this passage right here, I have this verse that says, year after year, Peninnah, that's the one wife, would taunt Hannah, that's the other wife, as they went to the tabernacle. And you can just kind of imagine, oh my goodness, Hannah, I am so tired. I have to carry all these kids. Oh yeah. You don't know what that's like, do you? Oh, too bad. Oh, it's so hard because you know how much my kids eat by the time I get to the food? It's all gone. Oh, yeah. You got lots of food there on your plate. Little side comments like that were going on. And it said that the husband understood that some of this stuff was going on. He was trying to be nice to Hannah. And whenever they would go to the tabernacle, they would offer a sacrifice. And they would take some of that meat and they would eat it as a family. And they would sacrifice some of it on the altar. They would take some of it as a family and they would eat it. And the Bible says that Elkanah, the dad, he was giving everybody their portion. And when he got to Hannah, he really loved her. And so it's like he scooped it all up. Because the Bible says you give a portion to everybody. But I'm sure he made sure that that fork or that spoon was super full when he put it on her plate. And he wanted to say, listen, am I not better than having 10 kids? Look at me, I'm treating you so well. But Peninnah would just make remarks about it and say, why are you giving so much to her? Why does she need it? I'm the one that actually does stuff around here. I'm the one with all the kids. And the Bible says that she made her feel so bad that she just cried. And she couldn't eat that food. So she just got up from the table and she left. So you can just imagine this picture. She leaves. She goes out from the place where they're having supper. And she goes over to the tabernacle. And she's just distressed. She can't eat. She can't talk. She can't think. She's just in so much pain. And you know what she decides to do? She decides that she wants to pray. And she goes over to the tabernacle and she begins to pray. But she doesn't know what to say. The Bible says that she is in such deep... Oh, I might have to get the... see if it'll slide. No, go ahead and flip it to the next slide. I think I'm having some... Oh, there it is, yeah. Hannah was in such deep anguish, and she was crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. She was there, and she just said, God, you know this pain that I'm in. God, I hurt so bad. God, I would do anything to get out of this pain. God, I'm just giving this to you. And she asked God, she said, God, I want you to hear me. I want you to hear me. I want you to listen. And she's praying like this. And the Bible said that one of the priests named Eli, he was there at the tabernacle. And he saw this woman. And you can just imagine she's over there and she's kind of doing this and she's talking and she's just in pain and there's probably some of this and some other stuff that's going on. And Eli thinks that she's drunk. And Eli approaches her and he says, listen, this is really bad. This is a tabernacle. People who come here to worship God. People who come here come to pray and talk to God. And you're coming here because you're drunk. And that's such a terrible thing. God is watching you. Do you not realize that God sees what you're doing right now? Do you think that God's happy that you showed up at his house drunk? And the woman says, no, that's not it at all. She said, I'm here because I'm in pain. I'm here praying to God. I'm here because I need God. And I know God is real and I'm praying. And if you flip to the next slide here, it's going to say that when Eli heard this, he said, listen, go in peace. God has heard what you've asked for. And the Bible says that she went back and she began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. So she went to the tabernacle. She cried out to God. The priest thought she was drunk, but when she explained what was going on, he assured her, and he said, listen, I know that God is watching. And just as much as God is watching to see the bad things that people do, he's watching, he's seeing you, and he's seeing your heart. And God has heard what's in your heart. She went back. She sat down at that plate with all that yummy food that Elkanah had put there, and she began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. And I think that there's kind of a pattern here that fits this prayer burden. And as we flip to this next slide here, you're going to see that the pattern is pain, prayer, and then peace. Pain, prayer, peace. And you can kind of see that in the story. The story starts in pain, where she is feeling like she's not as good as this other wife. On top of that, her other wife is trying to make fun of her and always putting her down wherever they go. The husband is trying to do stuff, but it doesn't seem like anything he does works. It's just pain after pain after pain after pain. And so she gets up from the table, she goes to the place of God's house, and she begins to pray. And it's interesting that the priest comes and he says, go in peace. And so it ends with peace, but has her prayer been answered? No. She has peace because she was able to share it with God. And I think sometimes we get the pattern of like, well, we pray and God answers and we get peace. Pray, solution, peace. But that's not the one that we see in the story. We see pain, and then prayer, and then peace. And that's the pattern of the prayer burden. Because you know what? You have this burden. It doesn't always mean I prayed and God gave it. God gives you peace sometimes when He can't give you another answer. Because He knows that you're in pain. He knows that you're praying. And His solution to you is His peace. And that's what He really wants you to have. And so as we go into the application again, let's just kind of flip through these slides here as we go in there. I kind of already said it's in prayer. It's drawing the circle. You need to keep praying for specific requests. So as we said, if you've got something that's a prayer burden, keep praying about it. Keep praying about it. Keep it circled. Keep going. Specific enough that you know that it's answered. And if you don't, Jesus said, ask. If it doesn't come, seek. If it doesn't come, knock. Keep going after that one. In the next picture here, we see that prayer is your heart talking to God's heart. God moving in your heart. And we said before that God can't move your heart with information you don't have. And that God begins to share these things. And as you learn more about God, and you learn more from the Bible, your heart is touched by God and you're able to pray and to do these things. In the next picture here, we see that prayer is the identifying mark of believers. When you go around and problems happen to you, you look different and act different than when problems happen to unsaved people. When problems happen to unsaved people, they get hopeless and they get desperate and they get depressed. And that's their identifying mark. But in the Christian life, we believe in God and we know that there's hope beyond this world. And it shows we're part of God's. It sets us apart when we have these problems, we have these burdens, these things going on. We know who we belong to and who we belong with. And then today, I have one more picture for, we're fasting here. We talked about fasting last week, and I just said in a short version, fasting is a give up to fill up. In the Bible, it's most commonly that we do food, but you know, there's no social media, there's some of these other things, but you know what, sometimes it's just maybe you need to give up some of these other things in life that are distractions or that are taking your time, and you say, you know what, I just feel like I don't pray because I don't have enough time. Well, if you give up a meal, that'll give you more time in the day, and every time your stomach rumbles and you say, boy, I'm hungry, instead of thinking about supper, or what's for supper tonight, you think about God and you begin to pray. It's the same thing. We consume social media, and instead of thinking about, I wonder what this, I wonder that, take that time and give it to God. Give it up so you can fill up on these other things. So then today, this is our prayer burden picture, and it's just it's kind of like the dad kneeling there in church, and you can see all the pain and the problems he has, but it just seems to evaporate off his back. It just seems to come away as God shines down in his life. And I said prayer is taking our pain to God. In return, God gives us His peace. God's going to give us His peace. And so let's look a little bit about the application of this. We said that in the stories, we start with something about prayer. We want you to understand it. We want to know that what we're saying about prayer comes from the Bible. Every story has a passage and a story that goes with it. If you can remember the story about Hannah with her pain, her prayer, and her peace, it'll help you remember this. But you know what? More than just kind of remembering the Bible story, we want you to remember how to live this out. And so I have a little slide here. It says, instead of complaining, take it to God. And these things really do fit with what we're talking about with children. I know that sometimes one of the things you hear complaints about is the government and the stuff and the government policy and all that. Does government policy affect our children? It does a lot. And you know what? Sometimes they're like, well, you know, when I was a kid, we used to have this and we used to do this and stuff like that. We start getting in that complaining mode. But instead of complaining about it, let's talk to God. Because you know what the Bible says? That we should be praying for our government leaders. We should be praying for those who rule over us. We should be praying for our judges in the Supreme Court. I know that CEF, a big thing that happened to them was the Supreme Court said it is okay for kids to have a Good News Club after school. And you think about it, there's a lot of clubs that go on in school. If your kids want to read a book, they could join a book club. If they want to go and do a play, they could have a drama club. If your kids want to learn about chess, they can go to chess club. And there's all these clubs that meet after school. And there was a guy, he said, you know what, I want kids to learn about God, so after school, I'm going to have a Good News Club. And just like you sign up your kids for all these other clubs, you can sign up your kid for a Good News Club. Doesn't mean that they're super religious, because people that sign up for chess club doesn't mean they're a chess master or anything like that. The parent might say, hey, you know what, that might do some good for you. Why don't you try it? And that's how it was in the Good News Club. But then all of a sudden somebody said, wait, we can't have that in our school. And they said, well, that doesn't sound fair. You let all these other clubs in your school. Why would you deny us any access to your school? And they said, well, because you're religious. And we know you can't have anything religious in school. So, out. And it's interesting, they went to court, and then they went to court again, and they went to court again, and it seemed like it was going back and forth, like they weren't quite sure what was happening. But the school board was committed to it. And the school board was like, we are going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on this. And they did. And the man who was going up against them was CEF. He didn't have that kind of money. And he thought, what's going to happen? Well, Liberty University has a part of their school that's a law school. And part of that law school is Liberty Counsel. And they said, hey, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. Every time we got to file paperwork for you, CEF, we're going to give it as homework to some of our law students. You know what? And guess what? It's all free! And Matt Staver, who was the head of the law department, said, hey, you know what? I can go. I can represent you at the Supreme Court. So that's what he did. And Matt Staver stood in front of the judge of the Supreme Court and said, listen, it seems that it's okay to discriminate because this is a Christian group. What if this was a Muslim group that wanted to be here? You'd be like, oh no, we can't let that. That's discrimination. Protect their religious rights. If this was a minority group that wanted to meet here, you say, whoa, we can't have you kicking them out. We got to protect them and have your rights. Just because we're Christians doesn't mean we don't have the same constitutional rights that these other protected groups have. And the judges of the Supreme Court said, you know, Matt, you're right. And they passed down a law that said, if you let these other groups in, you got to let Good News Club in too. And that has just been so changing. But you know what? That is answers to prayer. Because instead of kicking back and saying, this government, this makes me so mad, I'll pull my hair out. They took their prayer burden to God. They gave God that pain. God was able to give them peace. Praying for difficult people is the same way. I know when you're kids, there's difficult people in your life. There's bullies. There's people like that do mean things to you. When you grow up, you stop having bullies in your life. You still have difficult people. It's bad because sometimes they're your boss. Or they're an in-law or something like that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness. But you know you can pray for them. Don't say, God, why does this person have to bother me all the time? Give that person to God and say, God, they really need you. If it takes me showing you to them for them to hear about you, then God, put me in their life. Give me the grace to be with them. I wrote spiritual children here. I wrote this just because I wrote this slide up on the same day that Isaac Hagee called me up. And I was just thinking about people who had worked with us before who had moved on. And Isaac went from doing things at Good News Camp to going to that coffee shop in Utah and telling boys and girls about Jesus, and now he's telling Mormons about Jesus. But you know what? Sometimes we're not always happy that people leave us and they go on. And then sometimes it's like, our church used to be full of people. We used to have kids. We used to do this. And it's almost like we're bitter and mad. But now they're over here. Now they're doing this. And now they're just not here. But you know, we got to be happy that people move on in life and people go and do things like that. And it might seem like, boy, I really wish they had them. It'd be nice to have Isaac to help me do all this. But you know what? God has other things for them. We can take that pain burden and that prayer burden and say, God, this person, they're going to need you. Pray be with them. I know I prayed for Isaac because he's getting married. I said, God, just help them as they get married. They're getting married and they're going into ministry together. And I said, God, just bless them and do that. Taking these things, instead of complaining about them, taking them to God. We want to be praying for kids. If you go to the next slide here, it uses the word intercession. Intercession is when you're not praying for yourself, you're praying for somebody else. And often you're praying for somebody who's powerless. And as I said here, it's one of the things we often pray for with kids is that they would be healthy. It's rough when you hear kids who get sick. I know there's a youth pastor at a church where we used to live, and his daughter got cancer. And you're like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And it's like a lit a fire of prayer, and you just amazing because like when illness happens like that. But you know what? There's a lot of other things going on that aren't always such a big thing. A lot of times there's family needs. Might not be like so obvious like somebody getting sick or having cancer, but all of a sudden there's a bad situation in the family. Sometimes there's alcohol, sometimes there's an addiction, sometimes there is a dependence, sometimes there is some other things in there that are just wrong. And the kids are the ones who have to suffer because of it. And you have to pray and say, Lord, I pray that you just work in this situation. I know that the dad drinks and that they don't have the money they want and that he treats them bad. But God, you can work in that family. You can do things that we can't. And I just pray for them. It leads right into that idea about victims. A lot of times we think of victims of just sexual violence and those type of things, and we see that today. But it goes even more where it's just a lot of times like kids, they don't always have the ability to process these things, and they need people in their life. And you can just say, pray, God, I just pray that you would put people in their life that would be able to help them, be able to touch them. I think even in my own life, where people stepped into my life and shared with me and gave to me at just the right time, and they were able to give me those type of things. And I know that it's because people are praying, that people are interceding, people are happy, because ultimately the solution to a lot of this stuff is spiritual, it's not physical. If you've got a family and there's a gambling problem in that family, them earning twice as much money a year is not going to necessarily solve the problem, because you know what it's just going to mean? The bets become $200 instead of $100. It's a spiritual change that has to happen in order to see that work. And kids are in the middle of that, and it's great when people will say, you know what, I saw this because I don't want my kids to grow up the way I did. So many people today, they've grown up in bad families, and they're in that point of like, man, my parents did not have it together. I can't believe that I survived. I can't believe this. And now I'm trying to be a parent, and I don't know what to do. There's got to be a spiritual change. We don't want a ditto of what happened before in the family. We don't want a repeat of this bad thing. We want God to step in and God to break the chains and God to give them renewal and peace. And so as we go to this next slide here, it kind of wraps it all up with this idea. We said that there's pain in our lives, these things, and instead of complaining about them, we need to take them to God. We should be having a prayer burden and praying for those people, interceding for people who can't do things for themselves, interceding for them more than just physically, like God, get them more money, God, help keep their lights on, God, help them to get over this illness and these type of things. To God, bring Jesus into that situation. God, bring a change that's eternal and spiritual in nature. But when you receive God's peace, you kind of realize this happens. And this is taken right from the book that we were reading this week. If you were reading the Patterson book this week, this was one of his quotes there at the end of the verse. It says, before God can do something for us, he has to do something in us. And we're sitting there saying, God, do this, God, do this, God, do this, God, do this. And God is telling us that prayer burden that you have, it's more than just about everybody else in the world. I can do these things, but before I do these things for you, I need to do something in you. God needs to come in and work in our hearts and in our lives. And even if our situation doesn't change, God still can change us. And it's not about the situation as much as how we respond and how we react to it. It would be great if every story had a happy ending, but they don't always. And that's why I pointed out earlier, the prayer burden pattern is pain, prayer, and then peace. Hannah was able to go back to that meal. Hannah was able to get that food. But you know what's interesting is God did answer her request. If we flip to this next slide here, this is the verse that's in the bulletin, it's the passage. And at the beginning, we kind of ran through the chapter. You can see we're at verse 27 now, so we didn't read 27 verses. We just kind of summarized the story for that pattern. But this story, this verse right here, this is Hannah speaking. She shows up at the tabernacle again, and this time she has a baby. And she finds Eli, that priest that saw her and thought that she was drunk and sent her away in peace. And she finds Eli and says, "Hey, you remember me?" And you know, I always hate that in church when you can't remember somebody's name. Ooh, it starts with an H, doesn't it, you know? She says, "No, I was the person who was here. And I was praying." Look what she says in verse 27. She's bringing Samuel back. And when she prayed to God, she said this. She said, "God, give me a child. But you know what? If you give me this child, I'll give it back to you." She realized that before God could do something for her, he wanted to do something in her. And she said, "I'd love to have this child. I'd love to have him at the table with me. I'd love to be able to rub it in the face of my sister." She said, "Not about me." She said, "If you give me this child, I will give it back to you." And that was the prayer that she prayed to Eli. She said, "When you met me last time, I was making God a promise. And I'm here today to fill that promise, to do what I told God to do. I prayed for this child. God gave me what I asked for." Can we just read this verse together? We'll start at the reference and we'll read through it, because I believe that all of us can be speaking this into our lives and in our prayers. 1 Samuel 1:27. "I prayed for this child, and God gave me what I asked for." We're coming to a time of invitation now. And I just wonder, what work does God want to do in you? What is it that you need to be praying to God? Say, "God, I'm willing to do this. God, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to give this up. I'm willing to give this back. I don't care. God, you do what you need to do." What things in your life are a prayer burden that you want to pray about? And during this invitation time, if you have a prayer burden, you don't have to wait for songs and all this other stuff, but if you have a burden, especially if you have a burden where you're praying for a child, you're praying for a kid, and you want to come down here to the front, and you want to be at this altar, you can pray. And I'm going to tell you that you might think, "Well, what's someone going to think if I go down to the front?" They're going to think, "Oh, what kind of person is that? They don't have their life together. Oh, they're a terrible person. Oh, God, what's going on?" They're not going to think that at all. They're going to say, "God, I'm praying for them. God, I'm praying for them." And if you come down here, you're not going to receive judgment. You're going to receive prayer. You're going to be able to pray and give your burden to God. You're going to be able to give His peace. God's going to do it for you just like He's promised you, just like He said. And if your burden in your life is sin and something that you need to change, you need to ask God for forgiveness. God will forgive you. He will grant that forgiveness. He'll give you peace. He'll give you eternal life. He'll give you a home in heaven if you come to Him and you ask for it. So the altar is open now for prayer. If you need to pray, don't wait. Don't look around and think, "Is someone else going to go? I'll go too." You come down here. God is telling you to pray. Take this invitation in this time of response and